Okay, welcome to the Kitchen Sink University. I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and if you're sitting around home feeling bored, maybe it's a good time to take up crafting. So let's talk Nerf gun repaints. Okay, since I don't actually have a Nerf gun here, I'm going to be using an Xbox controller made by Mad Catz. Still, the principle is the same. And here I'll show you the supplies I'll be using. The original gun was this kind of green light gun thing with buttons and switches all over, and I really liked the design, so I picked it up even though I don't actually own an Xbox. So let's see if we can improve its looks. In this case, I'm going to use a #1 Phillips screwdriver to remove all the screws on the housing. There's a lot of bits and bobs you'll want to take out, particularly with a Nerf gun. Just be sure to keep track of where they all went. It would be actually a lot of help to take a picture for later reference. There's also, in this case, some wires and circuit boards that provide an interface with the buttons and the light sensor and the Xbox and all that stuff. Just go ahead and remove whatever parts you can from the shell. Basically, anything you don't want painted or want to paint a different color than the main housing. I'd really like to modify this and have a self-contained power source with lights and sound effects and lots of blinking and stuff, but that's too ambitious a project for this video. Plus, it doesn't really fit into a Nerf gun painting sense. So maybe something I'll do at a later date. Anyway, once you're done taking all the pieces off, you'll be left with the housing shells. To help the paint adhere better to the surface, it's a good idea to rough it up. You can use sandpaper, a wire brush, or steel wool. Just be sure to get into all the crevices and nooks and crannies as best as you can. And once you're done, clean off the pieces with something like a paintbrush or a clean cloth. In the end, you should have plastic shells with a nearly matte finish. All right, now it's time to put down a coat of paint. Keep in mind, don't just do what I'm doing. Get creative and play around with different colors and techniques and just experiment a little bit. The results could be awesome. In my case, I decided to start with a silver base coat. Here I'm using Krylon Fusion Metallic Satin Nickel. You could use whatever you like, but a nickel finish sounded kind of cool for this particular design. Here I'm going to start with the inside first. It's not really necessary to paint the inside, but I wanted to make sure there weren't any green parts visible at the end. With spray paint, you want to apply it in short, sweeping strokes. If you hold the nozzle down in one spot, you'll end up with puddles and drips, and it'll just be a mess. Just take your time and apply many light overlapping layers. After 20 minutes or so, flip it over and paint the outside. Same story here, short sweeping strokes. Just be sure to get all the angles, get every little corner. Since this is the visible side, take your time. Now, it might be a good idea to first apply a primer coat for durability, but this is just a quick example, so I'll skip it. When the paint dries, you'll have some nice looking plastic shells. Now it's time to do some detail work. You could do masking and other colors of spray paint or even use an airbrush, but I prefer to hand paint. So take a good look at your Nerf gun and imagine if it were real, even in like a sci-fi sense. What sort of materials would be used? What sort of technology would be inside it? What kind of world would it exist in? Maybe get fanciful and do something more unusual than the original color scheme. Just let your imagination run wild. Here I've decided that certain parts should be bronze. Kind of gives it a little bit of a steampunk vibe, I hope. I'm just using cheap acrylic paints for this project, but they work well enough. So paint the parts according to your vision. It could even take more than one coat. After a little bit of thought, I came to the conclusion that a couple parts should be metallic blue because, well, why not? Just take your time and fill in all the details. When you're finished, you'll be left with some pretty sweet looking shells. Let them dry for a while before continuing. So after everything was dried, I decided that all the buttons should be black because there were a bunch of different colors and lettering and all this stuff. So rather than use a brush, I'm going to use a paint pen. The reason being that painting with a brush leaves a lot of bulk on the surface, and the clearance is so small, I didn't want things to get stuck. I want those buttons to actually still work. Keep that in mind if you're painting any close fitting parts that move against each other. You might want to mask off the mating surfaces and paint around them even. So it all looks pretty nice, but I kind of came to the conclusion I want mine to look a bit aged, like a little beat up. I'll be using some black acrylic paint to do this. In this antiquing process, it might help to have the paint thinned out a little bit, but in this case, it'll be straight out of the bottle. Have a damp sponge or cloth handy, as well as be close to the sink. You'll be rinsing the sponge out really often. Pretty much what you'll want to do is slather all the paint into the crevices and corners, and then before it dries, wipe the surfaces you want to be clean. You'll probably want to do it in sections and let each one dry before moving on. When you're done, the gun will look like it's been through hell, charred, dirty, whatever. You can even do this kind of process in layers using different colors to simulate different circumstances or materials and things like that. Um, Once you feel like it looks good, it might be a good idea to apply a protective clear coat. But since I don't really intend to use it much, I'm leaving it the way it is. Also, I really like the contrast of the matte and shiny surfaces, which would no longer be present if I coated it. And now it's time to reassemble everything. With a Nerf gun, there's lots of small plastic bits and springs and stuff. They can be frustrating to put back together. Believe me. Uh, This one's pretty easy since it's mostly circuit boards and wires and stuff. Put everything back in, check that all the parts are placed inside the way they originally were, and then screw the shell back together again. Man, look at that thing. It's hard to believe it used to be bright green. Anyway, I hope this video inspires you to do your own Nerf gun repaint. They can be a lot of fun. So remember, try, don't be afraid to fail, learn and teach. Class dismissed.